Muchas gracias, Danielle, and muchas gracias, everyone. Oh, good. We were having some technical problems because I've decided to pivot slightly, no, not more than slightly, from what I was originally going to do this afternoon. My apologies to those who came hoping to be as embodied as we were yesterday and as interactive. I hope to have enough time to still do something interactive, but because of my awareness that the time is getting short in terms of this encounter, and our ponderers have been asked a very specific and I think rather large question in terms of do these activities, the types of activities we've been exploring, talking about, seeing in the sessions, do they presage, do they indicate a fourth wave of systems thinking? Are they just a phenomenon within systems thinking, or are we reaching some kind of critical mass or something new that would justify a claim to a fourth wave? And because that's, to me, a substantial question, I wanted to get some more additional ideas in the mix, so to speak, on the table, as we say, for our ponderers and for everyone involved. So I'm going to draw on some work from the past a little bit, and it will be a little more talking than I had originally planned, and in English, of course. So my apologies for those for whom that is a barrier, and I will do my best to be better next time I'm here. But first, I will ask for the, Sí, gracias. So first, I'm going to look at some slides from a presentation from a while back that's called Improvising Reconciliation. What I'd like to do is to go back to, in some ways, this is near the beginnings of my work, taking what I understand of Augusto Boal's legacy as communicated to me through the work of David Diamond, who was my mentor in Vancouver, again, who trained directly with Boal. So I'm a sort of grandchild of Boal in a way, or artistically. And how I just wanted to try and make what I saw as the systemic implications of Boal's work more explicit, that they were latent or they're in there. The same way that you don't have to call something systems thinking to think systemically. It is a way of being. Systems thinking gives us a language to talk about it, but there are many people who think systemically, of course, not least indigenous communities around the world who have thought in terms of interconnectedness and wholes rather than parts and things like that. So I think Boal's work has always been a kind of systems thinking, but my own desire was to harness that and make that even more explicit because of the urgency I continue to feel around sharing systems thinking with many people. I don't know, perhaps you're very aware of this, but the prevalence of systems thinking here in Colombia and in South America larger is something of which I'm very envious. In Canada, I am one of a very small minority in a way, or there is some understanding of systems thinking, but it's more of a catchphrase, not deeply understood. So to be in a community in which these things are deeply understood, deeply explored, and I still have much to learn is such a pleasure and a privilege to be part of. Why I wanted to explore this work also is to make sure, and perhaps this point has already been made by the other presentations that have been seen, but if systems thinking, if this is a fourth wave of systems thinking using arts-based methodologies, it's important, at least from my perspective, that it not be simply we can make artwork that is about systems thinking, or as I did yesterday, try and use embodied methods to teach systems concepts, but that it actually be a form of systems research, that it actually be a type of systemic inquiry on its own, so that the artwork is indeed an inquiry and not necessarily simply a representation that you're actually, then, and this is where I mentioned earlier, and where Ann and I both got excited in Joan's presentation when she talked about using social presencing theater within a soft systems methodology approach. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my early attempts to try and make sure that if I'm going to call this systems theater, it is not just theater about systems, but is in fact a form of systemic inquiry in its own right. So, so a little bit of background. Oh, so we'll go back one. Sorry, back to the beginning. Yeah, sí, gracias. So this is a production I was involved in with the company Theater for Living, which is David Diamond's company. And the show is called Shwa'amet, is the name, in brackets home, which is what it means in English. The word Shwa'amet is a word in the Halkomelem language, which is the language of the indigenous Squamish nation. Sorry, my apologies, the indigenous Musqueam nation, upon whose territory my university sits. And it is a Halkomelem word for home. And you'll notice that the presentation I'm drawing from is called Improvising Reconciliation. Canada is in the midst of a obviously very complex, challenging reconciliation with its indigenous populations. And I would say even more so a reconciliation with its own past, its own colonial past. Histories that were not taught to people of my generation in school. They were hidden from us, that are now impossible to ignore. Many of you might not know that in Canada, for many, many decades, Indigenous children were taken from their families and sent to residential schools that were designed to eliminate their language, eliminate their customs, and completely absorb them into Canadian society. That in and of itself is oppressive and unjust. And then in addition to that, because these children were completely vulnerable and away from their families, and in the care, supposed care of people who at times barely saw them as human, they were vulnerable to all other kinds of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, psychological abuse, etc. So there is a very terrible and shameful legacy in my country of people argue about whether or not to call it a genocide. I think it's fair to call it a genocide if you look at the definition of genocide as not simply just the elimination of peoples, but if you seek to eradicate an entire culture, it is a genocide. I don't think we should play with words about that. But we had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission similar to the one that was had in South Africa. And out of that has grown a series of recommendations, and the country is moving in its own difficult fits and starts, emotional, difficult conversation towards something that maybe could be called reconciliation. So this show grew out of those efforts. The cast was, so we created this piece. There was myself, another white settler Canadian of English descent. My own descent is Dutch, French, and Scottish. She is of Anglo descent. 3 Indigenous people, and then 1 non-Indigenous person of color. So one of the first ideas that comes to me about this work is the notion of requisite variety. Ross Ashby's notion of requisite variety. If we are going to model a complex system, the model needs to have requisite variety. And so the decision to include all of these different types of people, particularly the decision to also include a non-Indigenous person of color, so that we could wrestle with the ideas of what is the difference, is there a distinction between a settler, understood as the people who first came and colonized, and a migrant? Are we playing different roles in colonization? Are we playing similar roles? So the idea of requisite variety, so if you're going to make a play about a system, you need to have requisite variety from the beginning in who you cast to make that show. And while David Diamond always looked to cast actors, people with some acting experience that he believed could do the job, it was much more important to have deep lived experience of the issues themselves. And I was cast, one, I had extensive acting experience, so David knew he could trust me, but I had a particular job to do, which was to play a very problematic character, to embody ideas, to play a character with a very colonized mind, to play a character who is very invested in the sort of deep myths about Canadian identity, and who would be probably the character described as the most racist. Not a character who thinks that he's racist, but whose behavior would be identified by other audience members, et cetera, as racist. So even that notion of making a distinction, what is racism? The character doesn't think he's racist, the character thinks he's just a person, but we then the audience gets to be involved in a discussion about those distinctions. So the making of distinctions is important. So can we go back? Is there one slide before that? There's not? Can we go next slide? And then next slide? It's missing a slide. Oh, there's a slide that's really important that is missing because it comes from Augusto Boal himself. And it's what I call Augusto Boal's second order cybernetic theater. And I wish I had the quote here, so you'll be absolutely certain I'm not making this up. You'll have to trust me, I guess. Boal said, theater is the first human invention, and it makes all other inventions possible. It is when mankind, humankind, can see itself seeing, think itself thinking, feel itself feeling. So this idea of self-observation as the theater being deeply a mechanism of self-observation. So for me, Boal's vision of the theater is second order cybernetic from the beginning. We can go back to the first slide. Forum theater. So in case those who don't know, I'm sure you probably all do, but in forum theater, we show the audience the play all the way through once. The play builds to a crisis and stops, offering no solutions. The play is then performed a second time, where audience members can then stop the action and enter the stage themselves by replacing characters with whom they identify and try to solve problems or issues inside the story. The rest of the cast stays in character and improvises. The theater becomes a creative laboratory where we can try ways to transform ourselves, our communities, and the world. And that comes from the Theater for Living website. So we can go ahead, next slide. So there's another, I want to introduce another systems, cybernetic and systems approach that I'm aware of, which comes from Osvaldo de la Cerda from Chile, that he calls human reengineering for action, he and Maria Saavedra Oloa, which is a program of self-observation. It gives embodied learning tools to question the inner assumptions of us as observers of a particular constructed world based on a second-order cybernetic perspective. In other words, students can observe the observers they are, the distinctions they make when they interact with others, and as a result, the reality they produce. And to me, this speaks deeply to what foreign theater can do. Next slide, por favor. Motivating principles. It's not inherent to all human beings to know how to describe their own experience, to cope with the entire phenomena, and to open new possibilities for actions. It is not an automatic or natural process. It must be learned. Here, the question of how we construct our realities to take action and how a particular action is possible from a particular observer becomes a crucial factor. Within this perspective, the important phenomena is interpretation, understood as the circular activity between action, knowledge, the observer, and the domain of observation in an indissociable circle. Next slide, please. So I won't read all of this, but the idea of, he talks about plasticity of our nervous system, obviously very, very steeped in Maturana, and the ability to make distinctions, and that those distinctions are what either create or constrain opportunities for actions. And if we can begin to be better observers of ourselves, become more skilled at second order observation, we become aware of the distinctions we're making, the possibility, the contingency of the distinctions we make, the possibilities of making other distinctions, and then consequently the possibilities for different types of action that become possible. Next slide, please. We can go to the next one. Dance is a metaphor for the action of management. So their program is for managers. The certainty of human interaction in dealing with complexity. The need to couple through emotions and conversations by listening to others and establishing mutual presence. There's that word, presence. Next, por favor. So they've developed what they call an ontological tool called CLEHES, which is a mnemonic for these 6 different elements of observation. And for me, they become very, very important. So as many of you will know, the person who is the facilitator of a forum theater event is known as the joker. And I train, part of the work I do is to train people to be jokers. And they always say to me, where do you come up with all the questions you ask? I sort of see the event happen and I have some general thoughts, but I don't have the specific things to ask about. I don't know how to see what you see that then leads you to ask these questions. And so for me, I've incorporated CLEHES in the training of theater, of forum theater jokers to use these categories. So my apologies for the spelling mistake. It's cuerpo. I don't know, I might be confused between the, yeah, it's cuerpo. Sí. Is it different in Portuguese? I don't know. Anyway, is it corpo in Portuguese? Ah, sí, okay, that's probably where the mistake came. Anyway, my apologies. Disculpe. So awareness of our body. How are we moving? The way we move is the message we send, the reality we create. How did my body appear in different problem situations? Where would I like to put my body? What am I doing? So an awareness, ability to observe oneself physically in an interaction. Next, please. Language. To observe our language means to observe the reality we create and to be responsible for that. To observe others' language allows including distinctions as the interaction is going on. And thus that specific reality opens widely to change. The tool opens a design and action opportunity, represents itself a powerful learning clue with us and with others. So understanding language as crystallizing distinctions, both our own and those made by those we're interacting with. So can we observe language? Emotions. And what do we want to conserve and what do we want to change, which is a classic Maturana question in terms of manners of living. What do we want to preserve and what maybe do we want to change in our lineages of living? And next, history, our personal history, in spite of the past, is present and speeds up continuously in our language, emotions, and body. So our own personal histories, our own placement in history, our own understanding of history. For instance, I started this talk by saying there was history that was hidden from me in terms of our relationship with indigenous peoples in my country. Whether I'm aware of that history or not aware of that history creates a whole new set of distinctions that makes actions either possible or impossible. So awareness of history. Eros, not sexually, but the care. Is there a presence of care? Is there a presence of love? And I think, again, this speaks to Maturana's biology of love. I think there's a slide about that in here shortly that was also referenced earlier today. Next, silence. What can we learn about the sound of silence? Silence presents us a diversity of meaning and interactions. The use of silence in our action networks also reveals those things we want to hide or the missing talking, what is not being said. Who is silent when? It is someone who used to talk a lot suddenly silent. Do we notice those differences? Can we make a decision to be silent? This is something that many people of my demographic, white, middle-aged men, are learning to maybe try and be silent once in a while. I'm not doing a very good job of it right now, but I have the podium. So, but can we learn in meetings in my department? Are the men doing all the talking, for instance? Do we become conscious of these things? So the result is that when we as human beings, we realize the way we interact is a result of historical process, a different learning space emerges, observing the observers we are. In this sense, CLEHES increases the complexity of the human activity system when injecting other distinctions that allow extending the field of decisions. So the question to me that comes from CLEHES, What would he or she like to conserve, and what would he or she like to change of his, her own Klejas? The more distinctions a person incorporates Klejas, the more capacity to cope with complexity. And for me, theater in general and form theater in particular is an ideal tool for this work. I'm just going to run away and check my notes for a second. I'm going to show you a couple clips from the show now. And we're going to see an intervention. We're going to see the scene that was originally created, and then we're going to see an intervening audience member come in and make a change, and discuss through the lens of Klejas a little bit, what distinctions do we make, and how are those making different types of actions possible. And we're going to want to go to, okay, so can we go ahead to 13 minutes, 42 seconds.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
We need to go to the part in the video, we need to go to the part in the video that's at 13 minutes and 42 seconds. Gracias, gracias. So just a little bit of background for this scene. So the character standing there is a character named Lucas. In the play, I run a business. I'm a self-employed business owner named Doug, very Canadian name. And Doug is married to a woman named, I can't even remember her name right now. But we have an adopted son who is Lucas. Lucas is Indigenous. He was given up for adoption by a woman in an Indigenous community who was in a very difficult situation, and we adopted him. But in adopting him, he knows that he's Indigenous, but he knows very little about his identity, and he knows nothing about his history and his culture. And we have done that very, very deliberately as these characters in the play. We have raised him as if he is non-Indigenous. He knows, but we've assimilated him very deliberately as his parents. In the scene before the scene you're about to see, he meets on the university campus another woman named Sia. Sia is Indigenous and very connected to her history and identity, and is very politically active in opposing pipelines in Indigenous territory, gas and oil and gas pipelines in Indigenous territory. She knows Lucas a little bit because her father and me, my character, are friends. She decides, in a conversation, she realizes he knows nothing about his own heritage. He can't even name what Indigenous nation he is from. She decides to give him this object, which is a medicine pouch. And it is a place where Indigenous people put natural plants, medicines, anything that they use for healing. And they carry it with them over their heart. So as a gesture, as a symbol, as a way to maybe provoke some beginning curiosity in him about who he might actually be, his history, she gives him this medicine pouch. Doesn't explain anything about it, but gives him this pouch. The next scene, which we're going to watch, he comes home to myself and his mom. The other thing to know about his mother is that she is a minister of the United Church of Canada, which is a mainstream Protestant Christian denomination. So she is a religious woman. She is a woman of the cloth, so to speak. She is the preacher in the United Church. The United Church is the most mainstream and the largest Christian denomination in Canada. Canada is not a particularly Christian country, but of the Christians, most belong to the United Church of Canada. So I think we can just show the scene, and when the scene ends, we'll pause, and then we'll jump to a different version of the scene when an audience member intervenes. Okay, when you're ready, please.
Me?
Yeah.
Really?
You're gonna give that to him?
Yeah?
It smells really nice.
It does.
What about my pouch?
I I got to go back to class, but tell me more about this later, yeah? Okay. See ya.
Why did you make that so weird?
What about my pouch?
When the time is right. Is that good enough?
Cool.
Yeah, sure.
What does it mean?
She says it's from her mother's traditional territory. Yeah, she keeps sage in it, and it reminds her of something.
Can I see it?
I don't remember. It was a quick interaction.
Right.
Yeah. Smells nice, eh, Mom? Yeah. Can I have it back?
Different spiritual traditions have objects that they hold as sacred.
Yeah.
We respect their traditions.
For sure. Yeah.
So let me find out more about it.
Yeah. But can I have it back?
You know, I think your mom's probably right about this. You know, she knows a lot about this kind of
she does,
stuff.
but she doesn't have to take it.
Yeah, but you don't want to walk around making a statement when you don't even know what it
A
is.
statement. See,
Yeah.
I put on my neck, Dad. It was a gift.
Yeah, but you couldn't even tell me what it means. She said
I
it
do
reminds
know what
her
it
of
means, Dad.
something.
Mom gives crosses to every single person that walks into the church.
I don't walk in and I give them a cross. They have to understand what it means.
Yeah, we know what it means.
But I do know what it
No,
means,
you don't,
Dad.
Lucas. I just
I
asked
didn't do
you.
anything
Lucas.
wrong. What?
Lucas?
Doug? Hold hands, please. I'm gonna go make dinner.
Dad.
Hey, that woman has put her whole life into you, okay? Be nice.
Come and help make dinner, please.
Okay, so that's the original scene as it exists in the play. So you can see that we took his pouch from him immediately. He didn't know much about it, and we kind of made sure it stayed that way. Under the guise of, you don't know what it is, it might be offensive if you wore it. We had lots of very good reasons for taking that from him. But are those the real reasons? This is I feel like I'm talking a lot of bad things about my country today, but you know, what can I do? It's a very Canadian way to be, passive aggressive, while being very nice, while we do something that we are in control. We don't do it this way. We do it very gently, very politely. We take that pouch, and away it goes. So now, we'll jump to when we take the interventions. And there's lots of, if you were able to think about the Clare's distinctions while we were watching this, a lot of silence, history, lack thereof, language, all those different things. You can see, ideally, as you watch it, how all those different dimensions are playing. There's also an aesthetic dimension. I don't know if you noticed, but the director uses projections as well. And he started the scene, there was a knot. People might not recognize it, but it's actually a Celtic knot. So it represents, you know, Anglo-Scottish background. It also was in a tartan. The director asked me to tell him to find out what the actual tartan of my family's clan is back in Scotland. And we used that tartan. So we're showing that this is the dominant culture. And then as the scene goes on, that image briefly turned into the sage being burned, which is a sacred indigenous tradition. And then after his mother took the pouch, the sage dissolved into the stained glass window from a United Church. So there's a whole aesthetic set of distinctions and which ones come to the fore and which ones dissolve and which. Un momento, por favor. That's fine, perfect. Yeah. So now we've been working our way through the whole play again. So the original play was just under 30 minutes. Then the rest of the evening, and the entire evening is 3 hours. We're going through scene by scene by scene, inviting audience members to come out and replace a character. The invitation is, if there's something about the character's struggle that you feel you identify with, or you understand, and you think you know another way they could deal with it, come and replace them and try your idea. Every Theater for Living show always has a particular invitation, and this invitation was to move through blockages to authentic and honorable reconciliation between, yeah, see, yeah. You're going to see it now. Yes. See.
I really don't think that you should control my life. I'm an 18 years old guy.
When I was 18, I thought I knew everything too, but I didn't. No, I know, but I have some experience. I don't want to shape you. I'm trying to keep you safe. You know, you need to lower your voice.
Okay, but you always put up this excuse every time I want to let you know that I.
Okay, you know what? This conversation is over. When you calm down, I'll talk to you. So that's an example of an intervention, and it goes the way it goes, whether it's right, wrong, etc. Thank you so much, Anand. Fantastic actor, by the way. Yeah, sometimes things will get worse, maybe they'll get better. The Joker never says that was the right way or that was the wrong way. The Joker never tries to build consensus amongst the audience. We honor every intervention. We honor each person's observation. Someone might say, oh, that was terrible. Your dad, what Anand just did, that didn't work. Your dad walked out of the room. Communication is broken down. Someone else says, no, I liked what he did. Because even though his father left, he's told his dad he's not going to put up with it anymore. Both of those answers are correct because those are the realities of those two observers. And then people get to discuss and through conversation, and this is where Gordon Pask comes in, you know, how do they build shared understanding of each other's cognitive domains. But now we'll watch an intervention. One thing I think you should, no, maybe I'll save it till after. So someone has replaced the character of the wife. And we're going right from the place where Lucas asks for his pouch back. We'll see the scene, and then at a certain point, David Diamond, as the Joker, will say freeze, and he'll have us do something, and then we'll stop it after that. So you're going to see a little bit of the Joker's technique as well.
Yeah.
Sit down, son, please. Sit down.
What's
Before
up?
I can give this back to you, there's some things I would like to share with you that are very important.
Honey,
Okay.
do you think maybe you and I could talk first?
It's time, honey.
So we're not going to talk about this.
Do you guys want a medicine pouch too, or?
This is serious. You sit down.
Okay.
You know, when you were born in 1976? It was a beautiful day, you know. Your mom, I know your mother,
Yeah, she gave me up for adoption.
She was-
You guys never met her.
she was fresh out of residential school. She was only 15. She ended up
You knew
in the
that?
city.
We met her once, yeah.
You met her.
Yep,
I've asked you this 3 times. You guys said you never met
Son,
her.
I'm
You
trying
guys
to
said you didn't
tell
know
you.
anything about her.
I know.
Hey,
You know.
we were trying to protect you.
From what? Your own lie?
We
Mom,
were
give that
afraid.
back to me.
We were afraid.
Mom, I don't actually care what you're saying. Give that back to me,
No,
Mom.
you have to care because in order for you to understand what this is, you need to understand where you come from. You're Cree. Did you know that? You're Cree. honey, you're Cree. You're a Cree, and you were born into a really rough time in our history. Your mom was fresh out of residential school. She ended up in juvie. Somehow she got pregnant, and the ministry took her away from her. I didn't agree with it, but we were there
Wasn't
for
quite
you.
that way, but
Well,
the family wanted us to take you.
They thought you would have a better life.
Yeah.
And you would have a fighting chance if you could have a good home.
And relationships in this country between these communities are very complicated, and we've been scared.
Stop
Okay?
You knew my mom.
We met her once.
She's still alive. Did you know that? She's alive. And it's not too late to repair the damage and the displacement that you've had to live with. It's time. We've been afraid of this day since the day we met you. And I'm sorry we haven't talked about it and we hid your identity from you. We were just trying to protect you and we were afraid of losing you. We're full of guilt. We're full of shame. We're afraid for you.
And we love you.
I didn't mean to take away your spirituality. And this is what this is. I'm a reverend. I walk a different path. I believe in a different God, but I'm learning that we can be unified in some way and kind of find a common ground.
Freeze. I'm going to say go. When I say go, I want each of you using as much of your bodies as you can to make the shape of the strongest emotion that you're feeling as the character. The strongest emotion. No words, please. Just create it with your body. Ready and go. And a sentence, please. When I come and touch you on the shoulder, decide what it is, commit to it. Please don't change it.
I've never been so terrified.
Mine.
Mine, he said.
Don't hate me.
Don't hate me, she said. Shake your bodies out, folks. Let's come out of here.
So obviously a very different scene. Can you wind it back to the beginning, please? Por favor? There's lots of different, the beginning of this scene, please. Yeah, so what was it? 59:18. So obviously there are, if you're looking through the lens of Clejes, there are lots of different things to notice. But one of the big questions and challenges is as an actor in foreign theater, our job is not to resist no matter what the other person does, right? Because they're going to come on stage and try and change us. But if we have decided before they come on stage that we're going to just resist no matter what they do, then all we're doing is playing a cruel joke on the audience, saying, come up here and fail. At the same time, if we want this to be deep and worthwhile, we can't roll over and just give the person what they want either, because it's not realistic. So how do we do that? Well, this is also where acting training and different cybernetic theories of behavior completely dovetail, particularly a theory called perceptual control theory developed by William Powers, which I won't have time to go into now, but I've been working with the MISCO team on some of this. And that starts by understanding that the problematic characters are not villains. They don't lie in bed at night thinking, how am I going to get up tomorrow morning and be really oppressive? They are driven by their own distinctions that create their own realities that they then enact. I think what you hear from these two parents in this scene is a lot of fear. But of course, my character, the father, who participates in taking the pouch in the original scene, once this gets going, I don't try and stop it, the truth coming out. And I actually let it happen, even though it terrifies me. If I was a villain, I would stomp around, I'd say no, whatever it was. But a character is multifaceted. And one of the things that's easy to forget, and I have to train young actors to think about this all the time, is that if they're playing a scene where they're having a big fight with their loved one, no matter how nasty the text gets, in terms of the language they use with each other, they still love each other. You can fight with someone you love, but the fact that you love them will make a difference to how the fight might play out. So the fact that I love my son, the fact that I love my wife, the fact that I don't want to hurt him, none of that is true. In the first scene, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing. I'm controlling, I'm denying him his heritage, his understanding, his history, but not because I'm evil, because I'm afraid. And so when this intervention happens, and you'll notice I didn't have to behave like a real super tyrant in the first scene. I had to push a little bit, but he gave it up pretty easy. He gave up, and together, me and his mom were a good team. We know how to, so, but if they push hard enough in the other direction, I'm not gonna get physical or because it's not real to a father, to a character of a loving father. I can be a loving father and be oppressing this person at the same time. And so, but I want to go back to this moment because Clay Hess is also of critical importance for the actor. What am I paying attention to that will let me know, because I have a dual consciousness always as an actor, but particularly as a foreign theater actor, which is I have to stay true to the characters onto epistemology, but I also have to know what role I'm playing in this event. And so I need to have an idea of what kinds of things could happen. I don't actually have to know them in advance. In fact, it's better if I don't know them in advance, but I need to be able to recognize something that makes a change in me. And I want to show you what one of them is, and it's very much spoken to by the Clay Hess mnemonic. So can we just, I'll turn the mic off again, and we'll just show the beginning of the scene again.
Is this an intervention from outside?
Can I have it back?
If it is, let's have it.
Hi.
Who is the intervention from? Can I have that?
Yeah.
And Charlene wants to replace Sarah, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, where does she want to go? It's a bit later in the... No. There we go.
Yeah, so can I have it back?
Yeah.
Can I
Sit
have it
down,
back?
son, please. Sit down.
What's up?
Before I can give this back to you, there's some things I would like to share with you that are very important.
Honey,
Okay.
do you think maybe you and I could talk first?
It's time, honey.
So we're not going to talk about this.
Those two looks that she gives me that telegraph so much between a husband and a wife. When he says, can I have that back? And she's in that moment of decision. That's the fork in the road with the original play, where mom says, you know, different spiritual traditions have their own blah, 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 blah. And in that moment, in the original play, mom does this, looks at the pouch and has an intellectual. In this version, the actor replacing, the audience member replacing looks at me and gives me this look that says, you know what's coming. You know the moment has arrived. Totally non-verbally. She sends me that signal. You know what we have to do. My character makes one little attempt to say, I say, are you sure you want to do this now? And she holds the pouch up a little higher and just looks at me and shakes her head. And in that moment, as her husband and the loving father of that son, I'm completely disarmed because of the look in her eye and the gesture that she makes. Eros is present, care, love. History, the history we have with each other, the history of knowing what we've done together, the history of knowing that this moment was going to come someday. And that sense of, honey, this is gonna hurt, but it's time. And she says that, just those two words, it's time. That's all she has to say. And my character is squirming for this entire scene, but he knows he has to let this happen. So just those two moments of her look make a huge difference from a Claire's perspective in terms of me, both as the character and as the actor, knowing what I need to do in that moment differently. What new distinctions am I making in this moment that open up the avenues for new actions, both as the character and as the actor who's conscious of the role I'm playing in this version of modeling, of systems modeling. It's a breaking point. Yes, in the life of Doug, yes. What is he so afraid of? Yes, so ideally, every non-Indigenous white settler in the audience is asking themselves, what is he so afraid of? And looking at what their own fear is. What's happening just in the play is the family in this play is really a microcosm for the country. And ironically, our own awareness of how horrible what we've done is what we're afraid of. If they really know the truth, why don't they kill us in our beds? Right? I've asked myself that my entire life. I don't know how Indigenous people have had the forbearance to not be that full of that rage, the level of patience and tolerance and openness they have shown to us. We can't even comprehend it because we imagine being the shoe being on the other foot, so to speak. How do you have that kind of benevolence? And it's not just that. We've been very effective at making those communities, at taking power away from those communities. So it's not just their benevolence. I recognize that. But they've been systematically undermined in so many ways. But their fear is if he knows the truth, he will hate us and the family will break apart, which means the nation will break apart. And what we came to through the whole run of the show ran for about 14 or 15 performances, was that Lucas is still mad, right? At the end of the scene. He's still angry. But do you get the sense he's never going to speak to us again? It's going to be hard. He's going to be angry for a while. We're going to be uncomfortable for a while. This could take a long time before it settles down, but we know it won't settle down into what it used to be, and we don't know what it looks like in the future. But he's not going to kill us. He's not even going to disown us. We're going to be uncomfortable for a while. Is that so big a price to pay? Right? Beverly D'Angelo's book, White Fragility, about the difficulty white people have speaking about race, because it immediately makes them uncomfortable. That our tolerance for even just the discomfort of a single conversation can be intolerable. Even when we're talking to someone who has faced systemic discrimination every day of their life, we still feel we're entitled to feel comfortable all the time. If we're serious about reconciliation, we need to be ready to accept we are going to be uncomfortable. And that's what this family is starting to open up in this moment. Yes, yes. So that's how we make a model of the family, which ideally also symbolically serves as a model of the country. And then someone gets to change the variables. Someone gets to replace one of the interacting elements, the mother. Change some of the mother's distinctions. We run the simulation again. Boop. It reorganizes, restabilizes in something else. We had one that Hernan did, they kind of broke apart. This one, there's still some equilibrium. Maybe that's not totally the right way to analyze the one you did with me, because it's an equilibrium of another kind. There's a kind of a separation. But that's sort of how a lot of how I sort of conceive of this as a modeling tool that has existed in this form since the 1960s, but that I'm trying to amplify in this more overt integration of systems concepts. How are we doing on time? How are we doing? Okay, so I still have a bit of time. I'm going to do a little more, and I want to save some time for questions. Oh, good. Okay, great. Can you open the other, can we close this, and can you open the other PowerPoint, por favor? So this is from another presentation called Research for Living. So obviously playing on the title Theater for Living, in which, and you see the subtitle is Foreign Theater as Performative Systemic Action Research. So conceiving of this as a kind of action research from a systemic viewpoint, and again, that it's performative. Oh, here's where that slide is. It's in this one. Theater is born when the human discovers itself, right? There inside's the essence of theater, the human being observing itself. Man can see himself in the act of seeing, in the act of acting, in the act of feeling, the act of thinking. Feel himself feeling, think himself thinking, the reflexive component. Next, please. Okay, we don't need that one. We know all that. See? Oh, sorry, back one. So although I put lumen here, it's not really lumen. I don't think it's lumen anymore. My understanding of lumen was not as strong as it is now. And one knows if one ever truly, completely understands lumen. I have an idea of what it, but anyway, this is what Diamond said, as he was leaving behind oppressor and oppressed language and moving towards letting go of that binary. Because Theater for Living approaches the community as a living organism, that's not lumen. When plays are created, they are made to help us investigate ways to change the behaviors that create the structure, not only the structure itself. Something that's not in this slideshow that I wish I had is the classic systems iceberg. Theater is the perfect tool if you look at that iceberg, because the only thing sticking out of the waterline are events, right? We have events nested inside patterns, nested inside structures, nested inside mental models. But when you go to see a play, all you get are the events. That's what play does. It shows you the events, but the actors and the director and the writer and everyone has been rehearsing all the stuff underneath, and that's what they know. When you see a play that's not a form theater play, you see the events and you're left to, through your interpretive powers, try and figure out what else is below the waterline. But in a forum play, you get to go in there and mess around inside the model and actually go deeper down the iceberg. So that's one of the reasons, again, it's just sort of how this, I think of this as a systemic practice, not as something about systemic practice. Okay, thank you. Next one. Okay, we can skip this. This is just a description of a play that Burrell did in Sweden. Next. Sorry, keep going. Yeah, we can skip all this. This is from another. Yeah, we can, oh, well, I'll just say a little bit about this. So this is how I got involved in conflict theater at UBC. Having attended theater for living performances, and in some cases, having gone on to train in these methods with Diamond himself, a small group of human resources professionals from the University of British Columbia, UBC, my institution, were inspired to bring this work to the issue of conflict engagement in the university workplace. In 2011, quote, the Organizational Development and Learning Unit and the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Technology co-developed an interactive theater project to engage in discussion around conflict and build resilience around workplace conflict in a university staff development context. So that's how conflict theater was born. And then I joined in 2017. And fortunately, I joined right at the time while I was involved in this is securing full-time funding for the project. We can keep going. I'll talk about these briefly because a question will come up about empirical evidence, most likely, and what's the word I'm looking for? Where we check and see, is this work doing what we hope it will do? We have done some empirical work, and we have indicators that there is growth in all of these areas. Self-awareness, awareness of your own emotions, triggers, patterns, context awareness, awareness of the circumstances that might impact them, emotions, awareness of one's feelings, patterns, recognition or acknowledgement of habitual or common behaviors, perspective, acknowledgement or recognition that you have your own way of understanding or approaching things that is not universal. Triggers, acknowledgement or recognition that specific things, occurrences, people, behavior, circumstances will evoke a strong emotional response. I don't really have time here to go into the design of the study that produced these, but we have data. It's admittedly a small sample size, but the study is ongoing. It's longitudinal. We keep doing interviews every 6 months, a year. We are seeing an increase in all of these factors. People who have done our conflict intensive. We do a summer intensive. Sorry, next. And there's more. Self-regulation, other awareness, context, emotion. Sorry, next. Next. Self-regulation, recognizing a capacity or desire to manage behavior, behavioral awareness, emotional awareness, relationship management, being aware of how you and others might impact the situation and potential consequences, resulting in behavior change to optimize the relationship outcome in conflict. One might also no, it's fine. That's okay. So, see, and then. See. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yes. As Anand is saying, ideally, at a certain point, we will no longer need this unit, that we will bring about a culture change so that it becomes a new way of engaging. And that's very much what all of my work and the majority of my research is dedicated to that. And I won't have time to talk about it today, but I've been exploring it with the MISCO team in the other sessions, a specific conflict engagement framework that I'm trying to naturalize as a way of engaging. And it's really exciting because when I get back to Vancouver, this will be the next step forward. I gave a presentation to a particular unit in conflict at the university and showed them the framework and just introduced them. They've now asked me to come back and actually sit with them and use the framework while they actually try and have this conversation that they've been avoiding. So we're moving to a new place now, the first phase of not just seeing the theater and thinking, yeah, there's some good ideas there, but the next phase of application. So that's on the horizon for me as soon as I get back to Vancouver, which is very exciting. This is something I want to mention really specifically, again, going back to cybernetics. What is a second order cybernetician is a question a lot of people ask. Cybernetician, first order, well, we know, it's observed systems, and so what is a second order cybernetician? Are they still a scientist, or what are they exactly? Larry Richards, who is someone who I don't know how well his work is known outside of the United States, but I really recommend reading his work. He came up with, for me, is a brilliant description of a second order cybernetician, which he does not consider necessarily a scientist or an artist or it's a manner of being in the world. And he calls them a craftsperson in time. being a craftsperson in and with time is different from being an artisan, where one works with physical media, although I claim that all art manipulates time. Time is not a medium in the way that sound and paint are. Knowing when to say or do something in an intervention, how loudly or softly to speak, how fast or slowly to move, what rhythm to use, how to turn a flow into an event, when to emphasize or not. All of these involve a kind of craftsmanship in and with time. And for me, yeah, I find that really profound. And for me, that's the training that I'm hoping that this theater is doing. That awareness, her decision to just look at me, not say anything and just give me that look. That's craft. That's a craftsmanship in space and time. Do I speak? Do I hold back? What do I do? So this idea of performative system action research then is based on some pillars. So we have the play itself. So I'm imagining that in this as a full systemic program of inquiry, we make a play the same way that, as has already been mentioned a few times, in Checkland, you make a rich picture, we make a play. We run the play, we take interventions, we gather data about the interventions, we code what are the common recurring types of interventions, themes, words, gestures that come up. And then we use a couple of different layers of analysis. We directly incorporate system tools into it. On the On the organizational level, so if we're looking at the whole unit, using system dynamics, not hard system dynamics, not really mathematical, but sort of, the Donella Meadows qualitative loops, which I'll show an example of in a moment. On the individual level, when we talk about the individual people in the unit, this is where perceptual control theory comes in. And then critical system heuristics to do a boundary critique on the play itself. What have we left out that should be in? What characters are not showing up on the stage that should be, etc. So, in our previous play, should we actually see his birth mother? Should we see, what? So there's always a boundary. So to be aware that even in making a play, if it's a model, there's also boundary judgments going on, and that we need to, in the spirit of critical systems thinking, make those boundary judgments explicit first to ourselves, so that we can be honest with each other about what we're saying. So I'll just, in the next one, talk very briefly about perceptual control theory, which thinks of each of us as a living control system. And I was so excited in the first presentation, the second presentation of the day, of the ecosystem, nested systems, nested loops. Perceptual control theory, I won't go into a long discussion of it now, but posits the idea of hierarchical negative feedback control as human beings. So at the top level, I want to be, this is about how I see myself and how I want others to see me. I want to be and be seen as a competent systems practitioner. That then sets the reference level for a value that I have, which is I need to finish my paper on time. Because if I don't do that, I'm not doing the one above it. That below breaks down to the typing of the individual sentences that make up my paper, that goes down to the level of picking the letters in the words, that goes down to the very muscle control of my fingers. So all of my behavior is scaffolded in this. And so conflicts, sorry, if we can go back one section. Merci. Conflict usually shows up at the level of action. I want to do A, someone else wants to do B. But if we can move our conversation up higher levels in the hierarchy, into higher levels of abstraction, there's more flexibility up there, right? You've heard the silly example I use, Nan, about if I want to get to work on time and I take the number 5 bus every morning, if I start to think that taking the number 5 bus is my goal, not getting to work, what am I going to do when the number 5 bus breaks down? My world is ending. No, there's other, right? That's not the goal. That is an action in service of a goal. So to move through conflict, do we go? So for instance, in the intervention we saw, all of those characters probably have a goal of having a stable and loving family. We start by thinking the action to give us a stable, loving family is to keep his identity from him. By the end of the scene, we've realized that, in fact, to have a stable, loving family, we're going to need to tell him who he is. So we actually have been after the same thing. We didn't ever want to oppress him, but we had different, but it's through going up to those levels. What do I really want? Is my goal to make sure my son never finds out who he is? Or is my goal for him to be a happy and functioning human being? Let's take another bus. Let me take an Uber. And then I have to work out how much farther is that, and there's all those details, but. Yes, I could go, yes, and you could always change the objectives, absolutely. And you can change your reference value. Might have the reference value of a stable, happy family is that my son lives with us until he's 40 years old. Maybe I have to change that reference value and know he moves out and is independent, and that's how we're a happy, stable family. So there's, and in perceptual control theory, we call that reorganization. You change the reference levels, you change the variables, you maybe get rid of a variable you're controlling, you realize you're controlling a variable that you actually don't need to control. You're controlling it for some reason that is no longer helpful. So that's the process of reorganization. See. Changing the most fundamental values. Yeah. Okay, sorry, next one. So this completely dovetails with Stanislavski's system of acting. The hierarchical nature of goals. You have a big goal for the whole play, a smaller goal for the scene, a smaller goal for the little sections of the scene, and a goal for each sentence. It completely dovetails with perceptual control theory. Yes. Next one. Okay, so I'm going to show you a very crude example of using systems dynamics around an example from a play that we did in conflict theater. So, yes, sorry, I didn't send you that. Can you? Ooh. I'm going to need to use Loopy. We have some Loopy fans in the audience. So, I'm going to have to use your computer for a moment. Is that okay? I'm going to have to do some stuff on here. Okay, not yet. No. So I've made a. So this was a play in which OE, and I shouldn't have used the word for older. That's a terrible choice. So playing older employee. I should be experienced employee. I need to change my language. Class, right? Please, yes. Por favor. Disculpe. So this more experienced a member of the team is not really good with change. When they're asked to change, they get anxious, they kind of seize up, they're not very good. And they have a manager who's demanding change. And so when the capacity, sorry, here it is, I have a demand for change. The manager communicates a demand for change. I've used a term I'm not fond of, ego. I don't really like to use sort of Freudian terms, but we're going to call it that for now. What is the ego strength of the older employee? So you see the loop. It's a negative connection. More demands for change. The person's ego strength goes down. This is a positive connection, goes in the same direction. The ego strength goes down. The capacity for change goes down, which means the demand for change goes up. So can you hit play, please? And we'll just add 1 unit of demand for change. And here we go. We have a classic amplifying loop. And now the boss is going, I need to change it. And this person is paralyzed. Okay, great, thank you. We can stop that. So someone made an intervention in this play, and in the scene where they had to ask for change, what they did differently, and this is again using all the elements of Klehes to make other distinctions and make other types of behavior possible, started by saying, before we get into why I called you here, I want you to know how much I appreciate the years of service you've given here, and you've done so much, and 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 with sincerity, not trying to be, not to blow smoke, as an expression we use in English, right? Not to butter them up, to use another one, not to flatter them and be insincere, but truly sincere. You have been here a long time and you've contributed a lot. Before the change, before the request for change, there's a expression of appreciation. And then as the scene progressed, the actor playing the older employee was still nervous, but was not, had stabilized somewhat and was able to think, well, maybe I can do that. So what I want to use loopy is, and this is where, for me, systems theater differs from theater for living or sort of standard form theater, is that after the intervention happens, and I'm unpacking with the audience, I would turn to loopy and we would actually talk about the intervention in these terms. So loopy gives you this function. I can draw a new loop. Oops. Is that right? Yeah. Let me change the color so it's one we haven't. And I'll call that appreciation. And let me just move that. Again, this is crude. The dynamics of it are not, exact, but, and then I'll draw a connection. Oops. And the communicator is communicated by the manager, yep. And feeds back into the ego strength. So now, of course, this is one negative. Everyone knows their system dynamics. One negative is going to mean it amplifies, see? But now I've added a balancing positive loop, which means every time I ask for change, I must also remember to express appreciation for what the person has already done. And we'll just move that. And we'll go again. Now I add 1 unit of demand for change. And now we balance, it's a balancing loop. So this person's nervousness never completely goes away, but you see that the capacity for change fluctuates, but look at it, now it's full. The ego is still up and down, but this is now full. They can do it, they can change. So I use loopy, again, it's very basic level system dynamics, couldn't get more basic. But as a way to communicate, thank you, we can stop, as a way to communicate systems ideas and use systems analysis for what we've observed in a play. So I think that's all. I've been talking for a long time. And if there are any questions, comments, I welcome them. And I guess we'll pass the microphone. Here's the other mic for people who have questions, if they do.
Tom, no, thank you.
Sí.
It's always a pleasure to hear you. I connect some things that you said in our workshop, in Miss Co workshop, with this presentation,
Sí.
and also seeing you acting and all the video. I think it was really cool to see how is it going and how is a film theater going.
Sí.
I hope we do it again because we did
Yes.
5 years ago, and I'm not as good actress as you are, but I will try my best. I think that is, as Hernan said, a powerful tool for make change. I have tried twice with my students, but it's difficult because we are a lot. It's almost 35 students.
Yes.
The room is in this room actually, but it's too difficult to try to communicate. And also because I'm not an actress or learning in theater,
Sí.
so it's a little bit difficult. But in small groups, I think the message and everything comes too easy to understand with this methodology. So thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. You've raised a couple of really important points. One question that gets asked is exactly that, scalability. How scalable is this? Well, in this instance, we were giving performances to a theater of about 100 people a night for 15 shows. So over 1,000 people saw the show, and now it's up online. I don't know how many hits it's having. So there's always the scalability question, and it was a question we had to answer when the university funded our program. Like, this is an expensive program to run. They have to pay for me to buy me out of some of my teaching. We have a program manager who handles logistics. Sometimes there's catering for our events. You know, are we getting the return on investment? And thankfully, they believe that they have been, and that study that we did certainly helped. So yes, building capacity for others to feel confident that they can lead this is a long battle. And of course, in theory, we say, and to some degree it's true, anyone can learn to do this, and it's true. At the same time, I have to be honest, and I think the people I've seen have the most success are people who began in the theater to begin with, rather than coming to the theater later. David Diamond was trained as an actor first. He has the same, different school, but he has the same training as me. He did a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting and had a career as an actor before he moved into this. I've been acting professionally for 30 years, so there are things about this that come second nature. So that's one of the challenges, and the ongoing part of the project is, how do we continue to try and make this scalable, and how much more efficient can we get in terms of building capacity? So we're making train the trainer videos. I was involved in a project around bullying in nursing. Little did I know that nurses, who are such wonderful people, there's an epidemic of bullying in nursing. I never dreamed of it. And there's a website, and if people want to see it, and we can send this out to everybody. The website is called Let's, L-E-T'(S), ACT, A-C-T. And it's a website entirely devoted to this project called CRAB, which is Cognitive Rehearsal to Address Bullying. And we have well, they're not up yet. We're still finishing. There's going to be a full train the trainer thing to hopefully empower nursing educators to do it. And we provide 2 scenarios as well, so they don't have to make their own play. We have 2 play scripts of bullying incidents in nursing that they can use. So we're hoping that will make people more confident. And we've also created some, in English, we call them choose your own adventure. There's novels where you go, does the character do this or do that? We've created some choose your own adventure vignettes, video vignettes, interactive. So does the character do this? And then you have these different options also to address bullying in nursing. So these are some of the ways we're trying to scale up the impact of the work. There was something else you mentioned, but
I want to say something else. When you tell us that the play was a metaphor for what was going on in your country, it blows my mind. I say, yeah, you're right. Because when Hernan asked you about what were your fears, I say, yes, you're right. And we were, I'm so sorry you see us talking about your presentation.
that's okay.
We were
Translating that as well.
And we were talking about what's going on also, and we were like, wow, I'm thankful with you, and hope to keep learning. I know that what you said with the nurses, also making more contest plays can make more easy to develop those skills of acting, and make it easier to treat the conflict. The conflict in the play. So thank you very much.
Sí, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias. Angel.
Creo que tú dijiste lo de la metáfora, ¿no? Lo del
Sí,
poder.
que nos parece
Sí.
muy interesante.
Quizás repetir lo que decía Juliana, lo del poder de la metáfora, metaphoric powerful, ¿sí?
The power of the metaphor.
Sí, the power of the metaphor, yes.
Y también con tu exposición, lo que me queda pensando, como también teniendo en cuenta lo que te comenté ayer de las actividades que siempre nos traes, ahorita estamos trabajando un proceso de investigación, acción participativa con una comunidad que es muy cerca acá a la universidad y se generó un proceso de radio comunitaria. No. Ay.
Angel is saying that that he thinks the same about the metaphor, and also connect with what he said yesterday about your activities and all the tools that you give us. He now is working in ¿cómo es que se dice? Comunicación, investigación, acción participativa. I forgot the word. Like research, community participate.
Sí, sí. Community-based research?
Yes, community-based research. Yeah, I forgot the words. And now he is trying to develop with his team community radio.
Y pues hemos percibido como investigadores una serie de dinámicas perjudiciales que afectan el desarrollo de la comunidad, de los procesos que se emprenden. Y pues obviamente sería muy interesante pues hacer estas actividades de foro teatro, pero también me parece también genera miedo verse en el espejo como investigador, ¿no? Ponerse en ese lugar y también ver esas cosas que quizás uno como investigador no ve o no percibe en estos procesos de dependencia que se generan.
He said that maybe this foro teatrum is useful because he, in his research with his team, have observed how people have like bad dynamics, conflict dynamics, and some bad traits between all the community. So he thinks that this could help to manage that kind of things or situations, but also is afraid of seeing himself as a researcher there, like someone maybe civilian in that community, trying to develop at the community radio.
See. Yes, it's very complicated, the relationship with community, particularly if you go into smaller communities. In this case, we make a play. The idea, and when we make our conflict theater plays at the university, we never tell the story of one person. No one ever says, oh, this happened to me, let's make a play about that. We go through a series of exercises that begin with the exercises like the one we did yesterday in this room. And but then through this workshop process, we harvest recurring themes, sort of archetypal themes, and then we make a fictitious container so that people don't feel they are in danger of putting their actual selves on stage or someone that will be recognized. So all of because our university is obsessed, like most universities, with global rankings, and the word excellence is the word for everything. So all of our plays take place in a fictitious department that we call the Department of Excellence. And so we make these fictitious containers. It gets harder when you get to smaller and smaller groups where there's kind of no getting around that the protagonist, antagonist, however you want to call it, are in the room together. So yeah, one has to be careful, one has to be cautious, and that's sometimes why you might not necessarily go all the way to make a play, but you might do some of the exercises like yesterday. So we did the fear protector circle. And when we get into talking about it as a metaphor, saying, okay, is there anything going on in your community that this game reminds you of, that you feel comfortable sharing? And it becomes just the very, very sort of top layer. So the community's not ready to go right down the iceberg to the bottom, but it's an opening. And so it might take a long time to build the trust to make a full play, but there's things you can do along the way to always just be trying to push. And again, discomfort is necessary, but we need to do it safely and respectfully.